afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Arabian second aviation session for this year's event. I'm John Strickland from JLS Consulting. I'm delighted that today we're going to be having an interview with His Excellency Akbar, Group Chief Executive of Qatar Airways. He's running a few minutes later. This was something that we had to pre-plan because he's just come from an event out at Dubai Airport, but he will be with us in a few minutes. He's just actually passing by the Qatar Airways stand. So I'm going to be given a thumbs up by my colleagues when he's here in the theatre, so we'll kick off at that moment. But rather than stand here with nothing to say, I did have a few slides as a kind of plan B. So what I'll do, I'll just quickly run through a few slides commenting about the context in which Qatar finds itself, a quick overview of aviation today. And as soon as Akbar arrives, then I will stop the slides. But in the meantime, if my slides provoke any questions or comments, do feel free to put them in. So if I can just get my slides on the side screen. We'll have a quick look at the outlook of what is happening to airlines today, globally and in the Gulf. Fuel prices have gone down in recent months. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Security is a big challenge for airlines all over the world today. What impact is it having on different airlines and their business success? We have new generation aircraft coming in. That's something which is very important to Qatar Airways themselves. And we'll take a quick look at some of the key players here in the Gulf and in the old world, if you like, back in Europe. And we maybe have time to quickly touch on regulatory changes in Europe which have an impact for Gulf carriers and possibly even onto the long or low-cost model. Well, fuel prices are a double-edged sword. Those of you who were here earlier when I was talking with Paul Byrne will know from an airline point of view, falling fuel prices can be a good thing in terms of reduced costs, but not always one which airlines get an immediate benefit from, because quite often airlines will buy fuel in advance at a fixed price, so even if the market price goes down, they find they still have to pay their agreed contract price. And the other side of the coin is that while fuel prices have been going down, many airlines have been giving these reductions back in terms of reduced fares. Some flights which might have been cancelled in the past because fuel prices were too high are maintained. In some parts of the world we see excess capacity and airlines are discounting their prices to attract more customers. So a lot of this fuel price reduction is, when we look at airline financial results, given back in discounts. If we look at security, sadly we live in a world where security has been for a number of years a serious issue as far as aviation is concerned, and it will continue to be so. In the last year or two we've seen in many respects tourism to parts of Egypt really badly damaged because of terror attacks. The same applies in Tunisia. Even in Europe, recently tourism in France was hit very badly after attacks in Paris at the end of last year. And currently Belgium is seeing really a paralysis in tourism into Brussels as a result of the bombing at Brussels Airport and the Brussels Metro a few weeks ago. This is something really which airlines have to deal with. If business dries up, the lifeblood is gone for many airlines, and it can indeed put some airlines out of business. It means that there has to be very good airline management which is really focused on managing costs and putting money away for a rainy day, because those rainy days can be arriving quite unexpectedly and quite often when it comes to security. We see some examples here of the big European airline EasyJet talking about the impact on their Egyptian business and Parisian business, bringing load factors and revenues down, and Air France KLM talking about the impact in the French and North African market. New generation aircraft are really a key part of the landscape today. We're going to have a panel this afternoon where we're going to have Boeing and Airbus with us at 2:30 in the Tech Theatre talking about the new technology that's coming into aircraft. Well, these aircraft, such as the Boeing 787 and the A350, we've had panels and discussions in the last few years here at the ATM where we've talked about what would be the impact of these aircraft coming into service. They both now are in service. Amazingly, the 787 has been in service, I think, about 4 years now, and the A350 certainly over the last year with Qatar Airways, who will be talking to one of the lead airlines in the world for introducing that aircraft type. This has allowed airlines to open up some new direct routes and to improve fuel economy in terms of their operations day to day and sustain new airline operations, and Qatar again has taken the lead in that. In the short-haul market, we have new offers from Boeing and Airbus. Airbus has the A320 Neo. Neo stands for New Engine Option. That aircraft is about 20% more fuel efficient than its predecessors. Boeing's also got a new version currently under flight test. It's not yet in service, the Boeing 737 MAX. The 320 Neo has just gone into service recently with Lufthansa in Europe. It's had a number of teething problems, and we've heard from the group CEO of Qatar over the last few days talking about his unhappiness about that aircraft, which Qatar has not yet introduced into service, partly because of the problems. We'll doubtless talk about that more with Mr. Akbar. And in regional jet terms as well, Bombardier, one of the big regional jet manufacturers, has been facing a number of headaches over recent years as it's developed its new C series. This is a regional jet, twin-engine jet with in the region of 100 seats. It sounds like it's going to be a very good aircraft when it comes into service, but it's had an enormous number of delays in its technical certification program, and it hasn't actually got enough orders for the long-term sustainability of that program as yet. There should be news in the next few days which may help Bombardier. There's talk with Delta, the big US carrier, may order quite a large number of these planes. So we quickly look through who are the key players. I'm going to start off quickly with the old world of Europe, where we have three big legacy groups, and then we'll look a little bit at what is happening here in the Gulf. We have Air France-KLM, which was the first big merger in Europe of two airlines some years ago. KLM, the flag carrier of the Netherlands, and Air France, of course, of France. These airlines merged in the times before the financial crisis, which began about 2008, and produced good financial results, but they faced several years of losses because the market declined, their cost structure is very high, they have all sorts of legacy cost issues and constraints in their operation in Europe. They did return to profitability in the last year, but the level of profit here, this figure of 800 million euros, is not enough for the kind of investments they're making as an airline to invest in new fleets in the years ahead. And they have a lot of problems with unions and costs, and management spending a lot of its time firefighting, trying to agree with unions about cost cutting. And if that wasn't enough, the chief executive is leaving middle of summer to become the new director general of IATA. So you could say he's leaving with a job unfinished in sorting out the company's costs. Lufthansa, the other big European legacy group, also turned in a profit in the last year. It was an improved profit. Again, it was helped by low fuel prices, but again, facing same kind of challenges as Air France-KLM. Even this week, the last couple of days, there have been strikes in Germany by ground staff at airports. Lufthansa's had multiple pilot strikes as the management tries to take on the lessons of low-cost airlines and change their model to compete with short or low-cost carriers like Ryanair in Europe. And they are critical of the Gulf carriers. Lufthansa is perhaps the most vocal critic of the Gulf carriers in Europe, claiming that these are damaging their business. But the reality is they have to cut their costs. They've set up a long-haul, low-cost airline within the Lufthansa family called Eurowings, which has either started flying to Dubai or will shortly begin flying to Dubai. But that airline only has 2 or 3 aircraft at the moment and hasn't really by any means proved itself. It's had a lot of technical and punctuality problems during the European winter months. One group which is doing very well in Europe, and they have some financial results out at the end of this week, is IAG. IAG stands for International Consolidated Airline Group. It's the parent company of British Airways and Iberia, and more recently they bought Aer Lingus, the Irish airline. This airline produced a very healthy profit for the last financial year and is looking at very high long-term profit margins, the kind of profit margins which an airline needs. One, to have money in the bank to deal with the rainy days when you have an economic downturn or you have a security problem, but equally to invest in new aircraft. And they have a big order book for some of those new generation aircraft that I mentioned earlier on. Those of you who were here earlier on would have heard Paul Byrne from Flying Ass talking about working with Willie Walsh, who is the group CEO of IAG. And he's a very cost-focused man. He turned around Aer Lingus, the Irish carrier, to a very successful, profitable player, and then later buying it, becoming part of IAG in the last year. He's actually a good personal colleague and friend of Akbar, and indeed IAG finds that Qatar is in fact a shareholder. Qatar Airways is a 10% shareholder in the group, and there's a very close collaboration there between those airlines, which I think we will see develop in the years ahead. Looking here at the Gulf carriers, and I'm talking really about what we would call the big three, it's important to understand that we see criticisms coming from the carriers in the US about the Gulf carriers damaging their business, as I mentioned we do in Europe as well. But the Gulf carriers, and I've watched them over many years that I've worked in the industry and worked for competitors of theirs in Europe, I think the simple reality is it's their moment in history. They're in the right part of the world for what is going on from a human demographic point of view of the 21st century, in terms of population growth, in terms of new market developments, with Europe and the US becoming, they may be the leaders of the 21st century, but will not be so for the 21st century. Sitting here in the Gulf region, whether you talk about Dubai, Doha or Abu Dhabi, these carriers are perfectly placed to optimize traffic flows between the growing markets in Asia, Africa and Latin America, as well as touching some of the European and US markets as well. And they have the right aircraft to do it. The technology wasn't there in the past to fly such long-range flights as can be done today with Boeing 777s or with the capacity of the Airbus A380 and with the smaller markets, the 787 from Boeing and Airbus's A350. These markets are really ideally exploited by the Gulf carriers. If we look at customers who now want to fly from Africa to Asia, or from Asia to Latin America, the Gulf hubs are the perfect way to do it, and with the quality of service, the competitive pricing which the Gulf carriers offer, it makes it possible for them to compete very effectively in these markets with their very efficient wide-bodied aircraft. And in terms of whether they steal or do not steal the business of other airlines, the reality is also many of the markets, indeed the majority of the markets that these airlines are flying, are new markets. They've been created by the shifting dynamics of the human species on our planet and by new needs for travel which didn't exist before and which simply do not make easy markets to serve via Europe or the US because the geography in terms of flight routings doesn't make sense either for customers or for airline profitability. It's interesting to look back, but not much more than 10 years ago, the three airlines when Etihad had just been born, Emirates and Qatar Airways were already in business. Between them, they carried 13 million passengers. For the last year of complete data that I could get from this presentation, showing 2014, 95 million passengers now being carried by the Gulf carriers, and certainly now when we get 2015 data, I would expect that to top 100 million passengers. Really quite a phenomenal success that these carriers have delivered. And there's increasing evidence these airlines, as well as working organically to grow. They're looking at different forms of partnership with other airlines, some financial, some commercial, and a number of airlines and countries around the world are recognizing the value of working with these carriers, these big three here in the Gulf, Qatar, Emirates and Etihad, just as others are fighting against them and perhaps trying to hold on to historical patterns. We do see the strategies of these three airlines are quite divergent. Emirates is the oldest of these airlines. For those who think all these Gulf carriers have just arrived in the last couple of years, it's completely wrong. Emirates has been around 30 years now and has built its business truly organically, reaching nearly 50 million passengers in the last financial year reported, and their figures will be out in the next few weeks for the last year. They formed a very interesting partnership with Qantas, and some of you may have been here a couple of years back when we did an interview with Sir Tim Clark, President of Emirates, and Alan Joyce of Qantas. There's no financial involvement in that partnership, but it's produced very strong commercial results. It's increased Emirates' reach, particularly out in Australasia, and it's allowed Qantas to take aircraft which were losing money on a number of long-haul routes to Europe and put them into other growth markets that made more sense for them, particularly in the Asian region from Australia, but keep their presence in Europe by allowing passengers to fly from Australia to Dubai and then onto multiple destinations in Europe using Emirates aircraft. London is currently the only market in Europe where Qantas flies its own aircraft today. It's interesting, there's been a backlash, again driven by US and European carriers, to one different piece of activity which Emirates has done. They opened up a direct route, MXP, here is Malpensa Airport in Milan, and they introduced flights to New York's JFK Airport. Some airlines in the US tried to say that was damaging to their business, tried to get the traffic rights rescinded. Emirates has been successfully challenging that, and indeed that market has grown, and Emirates is probably the most successful carrier now in that city pair. But it's unusual for Emirates to do that as a standalone route beyond Dubai. They don't need the Dubai hub to make that route work, because they fly directly, of course, to New York from Dubai several times a day anyway. Qatar, well, not to preempt what we'll be talking about in a few minutes with Mr. Akbar, but it's also growing rapidly. The last full financial year they reached 26 million passengers. They've had the opening 2 years ago already of Hamad International Airport, their purpose-built hub in Doha. We'll be asking you to find out more about that. And unlike Emirates, who's remained independent other than the commercial partnership with Qantas, Qatar joined one of the 3 alliance groupings, the One World Alliance, a couple of years ago, and then, as I mentioned, strengthened their partnership with one of the key players in that alliance, British Airways, by an IAG, by actually investing in the IAG holding company. And interestingly, they operate all the new aircraft types available on the long-haul market today, the A380, the A350 and Boeing 787. And we expect them to be operating the A320neo during the next year as well, albeit that we know from what the group CEO said in the last few days, he's not happy about what he sees as the significant teething problems of that aircraft prior to taking delivery. Etihad has a different strategy again. The youngest of the 3 Gulf carriers, flying 17 million, a little over 17 million passengers last year. They are trying to, in some ways, make up for lost time. They haven't had the 30 years of organic growth which Emirates has had, or the almost 20 years which Qatar has had. They have built their own hub, they have grown organically in Abu Dhabi, but they've adopted a strategy of what they call the Equity Alliance, which is to have commercial relationships with a number of other airlines, and in some cases to buy minority stakes into these other airlines. This has given them quite a lot of additional reach, for example, in markets like India with Jet Airways, and in Europe with Alitalia and Air Berlin, with the objective of increasing the feed into their Abu Dhabi hub through these partnerships, but also trying to develop more local traffic in those markets too. Perhaps the biggest challenge, it seems to me, in the Equity Alliance for Etihad is they've invested in 2 sizable airlines in Europe, Alitalia and Air Berlin. Both of these airlines have incurred very significant losses over recent years. It's really not by any means sure that Air Berlin would indeed still be in business today if it wasn't for the investment by Etihad. Whether they can succeed in using their management knowledge to turn that airline around and avoid it being a dead weight on the performance of Etihad, only time will tell. And the same applies to Alitalia. For those of you who are from Europe or know Europe, Italy has a number of complications in terms of its politics, in terms of the challenges of doing business because of political interference, and that has always been a problem which Alitalia has faced in the past. Alitalia has many times reached a near-death moment, and it possibly would have finally disappeared into the realms of aviation history, again, if Etihad had not invested. They've refreshed the company's livery, they've changed the onboard product. I was at a conference only 2 days ago talking with people from Alitalia in a very positive way about reshaping their network. They're introducing new long-haul destinations, for example to Beijing, over in Asia to Mexico, in Latin America, but they're still far from profitable. They've tended to have a bit of a revolving door of chief executives, quite often appointed by the government. So there's a lot of work still to do for Qatar Airways, for Etihad to do if they're going to succeed in making that airline a profitable airline that doesn't occupy too much of the management time of the Etihad central management. Now, many of you will know about the allegations by the US carriers, Delta, United and American, alleging that the 3 Gulf carriers simply receive large government subsidies and handouts and are therefore dumping capacity into the market, which is not commercially viable and damaging their businesses. This was a complaint that was just coming to life about this time last year when we had the ATM, and we spoke to both Sir Tim Clark and Akbar about it last year. The complaint is still there, still pending. But the three Gulf carriers went into real fight-back mode. All three of them have produced very, very substantial reports, substantially longer in each case, in rebutting these allegations, and they've put those out into the public domain. They're all available for reading via the carriers' websites. Reports running to pages and pages of data showing how, from their point of view, they are creating new markets, they are run on commercial lines, whether they are state-owned or not, and really knocking any credibility from their point of view in the allegations made by the US carriers. But it's not over yet. I was listening to Sir Tim Clark on the Emirates in-flight audio coming over here. He was saying it's gone quiet, but of course the US has got many other things on its mind at the moment, not least the upcoming elections. So that itself will be a question of what will the new administration do about these complaints. From the US political point of view, it's a double-edged sword. If they were to listen to these three US carriers, which are private companies, and by the way, highly profitable, they would certainly make many other businesses and interest groups unhappy in their own country. Many airports want these Gulf carriers to come into the US. Many communities want the air service connectivity which the Gulf carriers bring. And of course, there's a little matter of Boeing as a big manufacturer and engine suppliers in the US for whom the big orders that come from the Gulf carriers produce many, many direct and indirect jobs. So it's not a simple matter of these carriers in the US getting the US government to shut it all down and step backwards from the open skies, which is the regime that they brought in some years ago. And again, as I mentioned, I think there are the issues of macroeconomic changes. Many markets which these very profitable and very successful airlines simply cannot tap into because of the geography of where they are, and possibly taking different priorities to those that are the focus of attention of the Gulf carriers. Another consideration in terms of the Gulf carriers is we've had what's called a new European aviation package come in from the European Union, where they want to, the European Union as a consortium of member states wants to foster development of aviation in Europe. They want to make Europe a leading player in the aviation arena, but they want a level playing field. Now that partly reflects the voices of Lufthansa and Air France-KLM, as I mentioned, wanting to see possible limitations on the Gulf carriers. Many say, has there ever been a level playing field? That is indeed a good question. Has there ever been a level playing field in aviation? And some of the feedback which the US carriers have got, or the American government and Europe has received from airlines such as IAG is, well, this simply has never applied. There never has been a level playing field. There never will be. This is the real world that we operate in. We have Gulf carriers running successfully. We have European carriers trying to earn their living. Don't ever expect the playing field to be regarded as a level, and how would you exactly define what a level playing field means? But certainly the EU, over recent years, has been trying to move away from bilateral negotiations where member countries set up their own air service agreements with governments around the world. In the UK, my home country, has been one of the leaders in having these air service agreements with other countries, and usually on an open skies basis, allowing airlines the commercial freedom to decide where and when they'll fly and how they will price the product. That has not been the case in all countries. Europe's wanting to adopt that UK philosophy and have more open skies agreements. They already have one within the EU, so airlines can fly all over Europe if they are majority owned by a member state. And that's why we see airlines like EasyJet and Ryanair flying right across Europe. Even though EasyJet is a UK airline, Ryanair is an Irish airline, they can fly and base aircraft in any of the member states and price as they see fit according to the market. Well, Europe wants more of these agreements, including with Gulf states, including with the UAE at a broad European level. They've got a difficult path to follow, because it could be that in the process of trying to achieve this at a European-wide level, they'll be lobbied on the one hand by the Brits, by the members of IAG to say keep it liberal, and lobbied on the other hand by potentially France or Germany to say put restrictions in place. So it's certainly something that the Gulf carriers have to be aware of in their thinking in order to navigate their way around this political challenge. And one airline model which is on the rise, but at the moment the jury is out whether this is indeed an effective model for the future of aviation, is long-haul low cost. Long-haul low-cost is trying to do in the long-haul arena what short-haul low-cost has done and offer low fares based on high load factors and low prices, low cost base, using new generation aircraft like the Boeing 787 and like the A350, and take traffic from existing carriers and grow new markets. But it's not by any means a proven model. We see two big users of the model so far in the world, which are Norwegian in Europe, which has been widening its long-haul low-cost activity, not only in Europe, but in Asia and the US. And we also see AirAsia X, based out of Kuala Lumpur, doing the same thing. But neither of these airlines has made any money yet. They've invested considerably in aircraft and development. AirAsia X even changed its management entirely about a year ago to try to achieve a reduction in losses that the airline was incurring. You could say in some respects the Gulf carriers already are a kind of a long-haul low-cost operation because they have the power of their hubs to feed the passengers onto the long-haul flights, and they have lower costs of operation in this part of the world than, say, carriers do in Europe in terms of labour cost and terms and conditions and regulation about employment. The next generation aircraft are very important in resourcing this business model. So Norwegian uses the 787, the A350 is a vehicle which can do the same thing, but there's been news in the last week that Delta and Virgin, for example, in the UK, may set up their own long-haul low-cost using cheaper, old Airbus A330s. And if they do that, that will be a challenge to the existing long-haul low-cost operators. Well, very good timing, because I'm just about at the last slide, and I can see our guest for the session is just arriving at the back of the hall. So I'll just check, is that it? Anybody want to ask a quick question about that, or shall we go straight to our guest? I think we'll go straight to our guest. Thanks for listening to that, ladies and gentlemen. I hope it was interesting and useful. And now we're going to get some really more detailed content on one of the airlines that I mentioned there. Qatar Airways is, of course, one of the leading carriers, not only in the Gulf, but in the world. The Group Chief Executive, His Excellency Akbar is one of our most high-profile people in global aviation, and always has strong views to express, and is someone that people in the industry, be they regulators, be they manufacturers, have to listen to because the airline is making its impact. So ladies and gentlemen, give a warm round of applause for Akbar, Group Chief Executive of Qatar Airways. I've just done a few slides about the industry, which was my plan B, because I knew you were busy this morning with some uncertainties of the timing. So, you know, I couldn't have planned it. I came to the last slide just as you came in, but I was going to have to do a little song and dance or something. But I was talking about airline business models and the importance of new aircraft and so on, many of which, of course, are key to what you're doing with Qatar Airways. So we're going to talk about those in a few moments. So welcome. You've just come, I think, from the airport, if I'm not mistaken. You just opened a new lounge today, new first-class lounge. How did that go, and how's it looking?
We always have something new to add to our business.
Absolutely.
And already within a week since the terminal started to function with our lounge, we already have received an award as the best airport lounge in Dubai. So
excellent.
It's good.
Excellent, good stuff. Well, we sat here last year, and I think then you were saying that you'd had a reasonable previous year, but you know, there were some worries then about various things such as fuel prices. How has the last year been? I think you're going to make some comment about it in the next few weeks.
Yes, we will announce our results sometime during June, as we have to wait for our audit to finish, and it will be the best year we ever had. I cannot give you the figures, which of course I know.
Absolutely.
But I will wait until we will officially announce to the press sometime during June.
And on that point of your figures, Akbar, I was mentioning to the audience how yourselves and the other Gulf carriers have firmly rebutted about the US allegations. I want to ask you something about that. But do you think at some point, as the airline develops, you will look to publish on a structural annual basis, say, the way that Emirates does? Is that your intention at some point?
Yes, that is exactly our intention. As a matter of fact, even if you don't do it to the public, they have already obtained our accounts from several regulatory bodies to which we declare our accounts. And it is very clear that the allegations made against us is unfounded, and it is just a proxy war on behalf of their European partners. We have stated very clearly in our application to the US government that two things we haven't done, which is already provided in the air services agreement between my country and the US. The first is that we have not violated any clauses of the open sky agreement between them and us. And secondly, we have not done any harm to the US carriers, which again is provided, if we do, a proper legal channel to address those allegations, not in the press, but in official channels. And both of this they couldn't prove. So I don't know what is the issue. If it is issue of there is no traffic between the United States and my country, or there is not enough traffic to justify so many flights a day between our three Gulf carriers, because there is not so much point-to-point traffic between the Gulf countries from where we three operate. But this is also the case with the joint venture partners of the American carriers. They do not have that much point-to-point traffic. I have given statistics in our filing and with my representations to the US government that when you add all the fifth and sixth freedom traffic of the three Gulf carriers together is actually less than the fifth and sixth freedom carriers like Lufthansa, British Airways, Air France-KLM carry out of United States. So what is the problem? Where is the problem? And this they cannot prove. They're just trying to protect their joint venture partners by claiming that we are harming them. But the joint venture business between them and the European carriers is only point to point. It's not beyond. So really their whole argument and allegations are, in my opinion, unfounded.
Now, last year when we met here, you were just about to go to Washington at that point when this allegation was just in its beginnings. How were you received in that visit to Washington? Have you been again since the...
I was received very positively by the authorities because they were very open at our rebuttal to all these allegations. And I think we are at the end of that road. We are just awaiting the final decision from the authorities in the United States. And I'm sure the authorities in the United States will realize that what we are doing in America is in the best public interest. And not, of course, in the interest of the US carriers, because they want to keep the cake and eat it themselves. Yeah. This is business. It is for everybody. Absolutely. They cannot compete with us. They cannot compete with us on quality. They cannot compete with us on pricing. They cannot compete with us with the hospitality we provide on the airplanes. So of course, they don't like competition.
Absolutely. And is that decision in the hands of a neutral administration, or is it political? Will it get caught up in the election?
No, I don't think. United States was the inventor of open sky. United States is a country that promotes competition, promotes business. And I think at the end of the day, the administration will realize that what we do in the United States is in the best interest of the public. Just last week, I received nearly 12 mayors from major cities in the United States where we don't operate, convincing us to start operating to their cities. So it is a very clear indication that the people want us, but the three Americans who are actually announcing record profits, the highest profits an airline has done in the history of aviation, are just, making nonsense of this whole industry.
And a really odd hypothetical question. If we ended up with a Donald Trump administration, he's talking about putting wars up against Mexico, tariff barriers against China. Do you think he understands this issue?
Look, I was asked the same question by one of the global news channels just a couple of hours ago. Donald Trump is a businessman. Whatever he is saying today And you know that the politicians, they say everything to get elected, and then immediately in the first 100 days, they will not deliver what all they said. And the 101st day, there is an absolute 180 degrees about time. So I think that all this is just to get elected. Donald Trump, I have mentioned that he is my friend. Donald Trump is a very successful businessman, and I know that Donald Trump will always promote competition and business, regardless if it is in the interest of certain entities or not. He will look at the general interest of the American public. Once he gets elected, I am ready to lay a bet with anybody in the audience that all these policies that he's saying that he will introduce will not happen. Cool and stable minds at the end will prevail. But that is if he will be elected.
That's right. Well, we've got a few months to wait and see what happens.
Let's see.
In terms of the route development, I mean, just to say one more thing on the US, you're going to get a lot of new routes this year. You'll go up to, you're going to go to 10, or you're at 10 and about to go to a couple higher, with Atlanta coming on stream, LA and Boston have just begun.
Yes, we will expand to a few more cities in the United States, but we already know what those cities will be. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you today.
What you said, and I found this quite an interesting quote. You've announced Atlanta, and said that you're rub salting of Windsor Delta, and then this consortium, the Partnership for Open and Fair Skies, said, well, Mr. Akbar has made it clear that the subsidies the airline receives are allowed to fly routes for the sake of petty peevishness. But I remember the first time I met you, you said, well, we don't fly planes for fresh air, we fly for business reasons. Delta's come off Atlanta, Dubai, but your report, your rebuttal, showed your US load factors, do I remember rightly, they're high 80s.
I wonder if my audience have already seen some statements coming out from the new CEO of Delta, where Qatar Airways will soon withdraw from the market because there is only 5 or 6 passengers that will travel on that route to the Gulf. Well, I think, frankly, he must be smelling glue, because we are already in the high 60s load factor, and we have still not operated. And once the people see the product we have to offer, I think we will have a huge following. People who want to travel on quality airline are looked after well by young cabin crew, perfect service, good hospitality, interaction, and they don't have to ask passengers to load their trolley bags in the head racks.
Maybe you could do a commercial along the lines that one with Emirates did with Jennifer Aniston.
No, I think the way we are doing, the way we run our business is really the right way, and any new route from day one is not going to be followed. You know, it is a new route is a business under development, and it will take us a good part of a year, 2 years to really get recognized. And we are there for long term. We are not there, you know, to chicken out because we carried only 60% load factor. We look at network contribution. We are a network carrier, and we are creating a large hub. As you know that Hamad International is already the 2nd largest hub in the Middle East, and this is where we are going to go.
And then mentioning Hamad International, it's amazing, but it's 2 years now, isn't it, since it opened?
Yes, it is exactly 2 years.
Is it performing well, delivering what you hoped from it?
For both years, we have already been receiving award as the best airport in the Middle East. As the CEO of the airport, also I'm not happy at that, because we want to beat Incheon, who keeps on getting #1 award. I'm sure that once we have done with our expansion plans, we will be by far the best airport ever built.
Strategic developments as well. When I was giving my slides earlier, I was talking about the different approaches of the 3 Gulf carriers. I mentioned about you joining One World and then becoming a stakeholder in IAG. Are both those two elements have as much importance today as they were when you began? IAG maybe in particular?
Well, let me tell you that IAG is the most successful airline group today. Their performance is absolutely over the moon. They have already announced record profits, and the first quarter is very good. So I always mention that we always will associate ourselves with rising stars, and therefore we bought a stake in IAG. We are by far the largest single shareholder in IAG. As of today, we are just under 12%. We were only a few months ago 9.99% shareholding. The One World Alliance has done good for us, but it would have done better for both us and our alliance partners if it was not for this nonsense that Delta started, and unfortunately one of our alliance partners has jumped into the bandwagon.
But as you said, IAG more broadly is a positive thing, and
it's a very positive thing, and we have already started to gain from our shareholding. We have already received 2 dividends.
That's right, because they are the only legacy group who's paying a dividend. I think the first one.
Yes, we have already received 2 dividends, and we will be receiving our 3rd dividend soon.
We're looking forward to that. And Willie is still performing well. Willie Walsh.
Well, I quite frankly feel that Willie is one of the best CEOs that IAG got, and if not, definitely he is the best CEO in the industry today.
It's quite incredible. I was talking to Paul Byrne from Fly NAS earlier this morning, who worked with Willie in the days when he turned around Aer Lingus, and it's quite ironic 7 years later to buy Aer Lingus into the new airline group, which is now.
Normally pilots, they don't make a very good CEO, so he's really a very unique
I think the only other one I can think of who did a good job was Gordon Bethune in Continental. As you say, generally pilots should stick to.
Well, it was before my time in the industry, so I don't know the guy.
Well, that was a long way back, but it kind of went somewhat off the rails after that. And in terms of other investments, I noticed you used the term rising star in terms of investment. In the past, you've talked about investing in goldsmiths rather than scrap merchants. Now, we've seen other airlines investing in various companies. I talked about some of that earlier just now. You've been talking quite a bit in the last few days about Meridiana, which is quite a niche, what you said, niche Italian operator, very different to Alitalia. What is your interest there in terms of what will it bring to you,
well,
if you do it?
You know, this airline has huge potential, which we see, because we wouldn't have been talking to them if we didn't feel that way. Their only problem is that they have not been managed properly up to now, and they have been bleeding. They have a very good potential to grow, and with the partnership of Qatar Airways, this will be a very successful airline, I am sure, provided the unions with whom we are now negotiating play ball with us. I have made it very clear in my press conference the first day of the ATM, and I will repeat it now, that if we do not get the working conditions we expect from the employees, we are not going to take the stake. We are there to make the airline successful and to grow the airline and provide more jobs, but we are not there to just bankroll employees. We want employees to deliver, and we want employees to be committed to the airline, and we want employees to look at the interest of the airline and not only the interest of the unions. I know the unions need to benefit from their employees, but at the same time, the principal focus of the employee should be, one, how they can make the entity they work in successful, and secondly, how they can make more money by working harder.
I guess Italy in particular, I mentioned earlier about Alitalia and all its history, is that you've got to take that tough approach from the outset, to be clear, because it's a country known for its
we don't want to
instability.
we don't want to take a stake, invest, and then find out that we are struggling to get an agreement with the unions.
Yeah.
We want it very clear from day one. And we will not accept a temporary solution. We want an open-ended solution that from today, 10 years, we have no issues. And we are ready to look after the employees, provided they deliver, provided they work to the standards Qatar Airways expect from any employee to deliver to the business. Because we will grow the airline.
Sure.
It will not be anymore a niche carrier.
Okay.
It will be a global brand, a carrier that Italy will be very proud of.
I was going to ask you that because at the moment it is a point-to-point airline that has to stand on its own 2 feet. So you will look for it to do the two things. One, to become a bigger airline with that pride and profit indeed, and working with you to extend Qatar's access to traffic that they can bring.
No. We are now a very large stakeholder in IAG. We never used IAG to get access anywhere.
Right.
And we are going to do the same with Meridiana. Meridiana will be an independent Italian carrier controlled by the Italian management with Qatar Airways equity and Qatar Airways technical help and Qatar Airways supplying them new aircraft that they require to grow. And it will be an Italian carrier with its hub in Italy serving the Italian people.
That's very clear. And you also mentioned, possibly been interested, but maybe not right now because it's enough to digest one thing if this happens. Royal Air Morocco as a very interesting African carrier because they have a particular niche in African hub, but a challenge short haul, a lot of low-cost carriers that have gone into Morocco.
Well, I don't think that the low-cost carriers being around full-service airlines should be frightened of. Why we are so keen in Royal Air Morocco? One, because it is a very well-known, old, established brand in Africa. Secondly, its potential is underutilized. Casablanca could be a major hub between Africa, Europe, and the West, United States, North and South America. But that hub is not being properly developed because lack of investment and the lack of focus to the standards of customer service. And we as Qatar Airways, becoming a shareholder in Royal Air Morocco, would develop that aircraft, that airline to be a very strong brand serving Africa to the world.
Yeah. Because I mean, so as you say, that point in Africa, that position geographically is ideal for what they're doing with this hub.
Exactly.
They haven't really got the muscle or perhaps the focus to do it on their own right now.
Exactly.
So we should watch out on the medium term. And just quickly, one other on the investment side, Indigo, you've made clear you'd like to, not been able to yet, but it's still in your sights. You still see the positive benefit.
For us, unfortunately, as of today, it is history. They have already IPO'd. They were oversubscribed because, keeping in mind, Indigo is the best run airline in India. And this is why we were interested. I did not realize that, again, an airline cannot invest in an IPO of another airline in India. It can only be an investment body. It could have been our sovereign fund, for example, taking a stake in Indigo. The information came to us too late, and the decision-making in Qatar Airways is fast. But if our investment authority or our sovereign fund had to take, they have a longer approval process. Right. So there was too short a time for us to get everything in place in order to take the stake. But yes, if we had again another opportunity and we had enough indication of time, that we will again make a bid for Indigo.
Okay. Now fleet, again I gave the comments a bit before you arrived about Qatar being unique in having all the new aircraft types that are available today, or what you would call new generation, in the fleet on the long haul amazingly, the 787 has been in service worldwide now 4 years. It's got incredible. The time has passed. You have that. The A350 is about a year with you now, I think, and of course the 380. First of all, are you happy with the operational technical performance of those three types? Are they delivering what they need to in the fleet?
I had made it very clear that we were having a lot of problems with the 787. The 787 is now nearly mature, so we have less issues with them. Their on-time performance has been very good. The dispatch reliability is now very good. Yes, we have some issues with the A350, which was expected, and I said it many times because it's a new program. However, I feel that Airbus is losing steam in resolving those teething problems.
On the 350?
On the 350. And we are, as a customer, very demanding and putting a lot of pressure on Airbus to sort out these issues. The biggest problem in the industry today, with both aircraft manufacturers, or actually with all the three major aircraft manufacturers, including Embraer, is that they are getting supplied by the same supply chain.
Okay.
There are very limited people that make avionics, they make the APUs, and now both Airbus and Boeing are going to single source engine providers, which really, in my opinion, is not a very good idea.
Right.
And there is not so much investment by those supply chain to invest to produce more of the equipment when all the three are buying from the same people.
Yes.
And this is now becoming a very big issue, where the component reliability is not as it should be because there is so limited people doing the same thing.
Right. Very interesting point. I mean, the average person on the street wouldn't have a clue about that. They wouldn't realise that behind the image of Boeing or Airbus, that was a fundamental challenge. Do you think...
And all their production is, eaten up in building these large numbers of new aeroplanes.
Yes.
So the spares holding becomes very, very small. And this, of course, when you don't have good reliability of the stuff and you have very limited spares available, this also then becomes that both manufacturers have to cannibalize from the production line.
Which gives its own problems and causes
Yes.
access to it. I mean, you've talked about the 320 Neo and the issues there, and I mean, Lufthansa, I think, is only airline.
No, actually it's Lufthansa and Indigo that have received the Neos.
And Lufthansa is severely limiting how they're using them on some domestic
Well, not
services.
only that, I'm sure you know that the Lufthansa has suspended taking any further
further
deliveries.
That's right. Yeah.
So it was right not to take.
Do you think that manufacturers are not realistic with the amount of new aircraft we've had coming in? I can remember, I'm sure you can, the 320 itself was new in the 1980s, and I worked for an airline called British Caledonia. We were supposed to get these aircraft, but luckily we were bought by British Airways by the time the planes were delivered because they were so unreliable at the beginning. It was a new glass cockpit. The engineers used to call it the ground bus, not the Airbus, because they spent more time on the ground. But do you think manufacturers, when they make step changes in technology, are over-optimistic?
I don't think that I would call Airbus as a ground bus because
It's 30 years ago.
The aircraft, even in the Neo, the aircraft flies.
Yeah.
But how much it can fly?
Reliability.
What is the reliability? How robust is this new aeroplane? Though it is really a new aeroplane.
Yeah.
Okay, it may have the same cockpit, it will have the same fuselage, but a lot of the components are new or strengthened. So they have to go back and see what are the issues and ask very, very serious question that major airline like Qatar Airways and Lufthansa are now not taking those deliveries. There is a problem, and this needs to be resolved.
Absolutely. In terms of orders, I mean, the order book is big, outstanding for Qatar anyway, and we had a quieter Dubai air show last year. The Farnborough is coming up this year. That's normally one that excites the juices in the industry. Do you think we should expect to see more activity from yourselves at that show?
I will leave this matter without any comments till we come closer to the Farnborough.
Okay, watch the space for a couple of months down the line. And just maybe to wrap up, as time is limited, the industry's faced some really big global challenges, not what it doesn't usually, but security is becoming a bigger issue. Markets that have been touched or even damaged completely, especially tourism markets. Do you think the industry is taking the right approach in dealing with essentially the unknown? We don't know what's going to happen where or when.
Look, there are, John, frankly speaking, there are major strides taken in providing adequate security and, of course, investment in equipment to mitigate this risk. However, I think we still have a lot of work to do because, as everybody knows in this room, that there is so much inconvenience to people at airports due to the excessive security process that is in airports. There are major investments now being done by suppliers of security equipment, where in my opinion in the next 5 years there will be more sensor-based than physical security processes that people. So there will be more seamless travel experience than currently people face.
It is a lost area of frustration.
But let me tell you something. Whatever you will invest, whatever you will do, at the end of the day, you cannot have absolute 100%. When somebody is determined to circumvent the security systems, they find ways. They will try, but out of 10, there is a possibility that one will go through. Because terrorists, unfortunately, are also becoming very sophisticated. They put airports under surveillance. They pass through airports. They use frequently the same channels in order to see which is the weakest point, which then they exploit. And our job as airport operator is to make sure that we do things that it becomes very difficult for their surveillance to succeed.
Akbar, conscious you've got other activities and this room is going to be used again. I do want to ask you one little question which I think you'll like. One of your favourite topics, IATA, which you've become more actively involved in yourself in management in recent years. Tony Tyler decided not to do a second term and is now going to be Alexandre de Juliac who's coming in. He's an Air France guy and a Frenchman, making a clear link between the two. Not the most natural enthusiast of liberalisation or the Gulf carriers. What is your view about him taking the helm for this role, which is a global one?
Well, I was one of the individuals that interviewed him for this job, being a member of not the board, but a member of the chair committee.
Right. Okay.
And before we put it to the board.
Okay.
And I made it very clear to him what he has to explain to me. What is his opinion as the CEO of Air France? He was instrumental in creating this whole rebuttal against us. He was actually the one that created this accusation and enticed his minister together with Lufthansa and the Minister of Transport of Germany to demand that EU renegotiate air services agreements jointly with mostly Gulf carriers who were not performing on level playing field and were being subsidized by the government. So I wanted him to explain to me how now he is going to change this attitude and not represent just an alliance in IATA, but to represent all the world's airlines as a neutral body, promoting competition, promoting expansion of airlines, supporting airlines like Gulf carriers. What would be his stand on this? I would like to know if I have to accept him as the right candidate for IATA. He gave me several responses, which gives me the comfort that he was doing that for the sake of his career, which was of course misguided. but he was doing it, and that now he will have to protect the interest of all the airlines, which really, in my opinion, I was not very happy with my friend Tony, because he was sitting on the fence. As the leader of an international airline community, a leader should always stand up and be counted and protect the interest of everybody, including the interest of Delta, American, United, Etihad, Emirates, Qatar Airways, because he's our ambassador. He is representing us in this world body, and he should not shy away of demanding that this nonsense should be stopped, and the Gulf Airlines or any other airlines in the world have the right to expand and have the right to receive equity from their owners. And the owners are our governments. We do not get equity every day. Our equity to them is subsidy. But the European carriers forget that for nearly 7 decades, they were receiving subsidies from their government, funds from their government to operate. And post-privatization, they also received billions in restructuring assistance. And most recently, during the 9/11. And post 9/11, some European countries injected money into their sick airlines. As for the Americans, for years they have been losing money and getting legal protection, which to my understanding is subsidy. Chapter 11 is a legal subsidy. And the Europeans should know that during Chapter 11, they were receiving and embracing these bankrupt airlines as their alliance partners. So why, when it comes to Qatar Airways, Emirates, and Etihad, it becomes a subsidy? We don't receive subsidies. We go to the financial markets to take funding for our airplanes. We expand. Yes, the government gave us a very large chunk of equity, which they are completely within their right to do so, because they are the owner of this business. And an airline, for a small country like mine, is a very important economic driver. So I don't see what is the problem. And why they are only targeting Gulf carriers. Delta became an equity shareholder of an airline that is absolutely subsidized. Why airlines in India, which is part of Star, the Star Alliance people are not complaining that they are subsidized? Why Ethiopian, which is a state-owned airline receiving funds from the government, is not subsidized? Because they are Star Alliance partner. Egypt Air, receiving funds from their government to operate, to expand, because it is Star Alliance, it's okay. South African Airways, which is an airline that keeps on receiving funds from the government, is part of Star, but that's okay. Thai International is government-owned airline, receiving funds from the government, part of Star, that's okay. But when it comes to us, it's not okay. Why? Why did they? Because their partners, their alliance partners can get subsidy, but we cannot. Which actually is legitimately equity in the airline.
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting to see how this pans out. And now we're going to have a Frenchman at the helm of IATA. Also thinking of France being quite limited in its air service agreements compared to Europe as a whole.
But I want to tell you something, John, that me sitting on IATA, Board of Governors and IATA Chair Committee, I don't represent Qatar Airways. I represent the international airline community. And I will assure you about one thing. As long as I am there, I will watch over any CEO of IATA. I'll watch over his shoulder like a hawk. Because for me, he has to serve the airline community. and it is my duty to the airline community who have elected me on the board of governors to absolutely look at their interest to the maximum, and this I will do.
Akbar, I think it's a very good note to close on. I could happily talk on, of course, but thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it, and look forward to speaking to you again at future ATM. So, ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency Akbar Group Chief Executive of Qatar Airways. Thank you very much.